Assembly has approved the electronic transmission of election results with manual collation retained as a backup. The resolution at the Senate followed a test plenary session with which 15 lawmakers opposed the retention of the controversial proviso in Clause 60 of the Electoral Act, Bill 2026. The same scenario played out of the House of Representatives yesterday as the lawmakers rescinded its earlier stance on the mandatory transmission of the election results in conformity with the decision of the Senate. The Green Chamber had before now voted for real-time and mandatory electronic transmission of election results during the electoral amendment. But in a stunning turn, the House at the emergency plenary made a U-turn when Honorable Tajuddin Abbas asked that the motion be moved for the House to rescind its decision in order to debate the contentious part of the electoral bill. Joining us on the show to discuss the National Assembly choice to retain manual backup for result transmission and concerns over the timing of the 2027 general election is Mike Igini, former INEC Electoral Commissioner. Great to have you.
Good morning.
I would like to ask you, what transpired, and are you tired of Nigeria? Because you can't be tired. But I would like to come to Dr. Abati first, since he's in our studio, to ask the first question before I come back and ask you my question. Dr. Abati, over to you.
Okay, Mike Igini, very good to see you again. You know, you've been off the scene, but, well, there is a national emergency, as it were, 2027 general election. So it's good to have you back, you know, in the limelight. But you had issued a statement in which you gave empirical evidence that, in fact, without electronic real-time transmission, most of the lawmakers in the National Assembly may not return. And you plotted the turnover rate that we have been having over the years. But do you think that with the decision that has now been taken by the National Assembly, do you think anybody has taken your advice? Do you think that they have, the lawmakers have learned any lessons from what you claim befell their predecessors in that National Assembly, or are you disappointed in any way?
Thank you, Dr. Abati, Rufai, and Ayo for having me. But I think that before I answer that question, I need to clear something here. And that is that Nigerians have been wondering that for the past 2 years, I have decided to switch off painfully with respect to anything to do with our country. And I put my television on Chinese station, not because I hear Chinese, because I have spent over 30 years of my life, 10 practical years in INEC, together with other Nigerians, on how to remove the history of our election from the poetry of frustration and pain, so that we can give meaning and purpose to the ballot as the best means of the expression of the will of the people in a democracy. If after a decade of effort in this direction, we are still back to where we are, and given the fact that when I left office in 2022, I was not part of the 2023 elections, but I was part of those who educated Nigerians. That is why people have been holding me accountable. That on this channel, Arise Television, when I left office, the Duke of Delta, Ndoka Bagwena, I called him. I called John Momo, Raymond Dokwesi, the TVC, and I said, I have decided that all the requests for consultancy, I turned everything down. That it's unethical, that having worked in a commission, having been part of those who develop the processes, it would be wrong of me to take any appointment from anybody. On this Arise Television, for over 1 year, you never charged me a dime, nor was I paid by INEC or anybody, but for the service of the country. To now find that all that we did are now in vain, that's why I don't regret that I wasted my 10 years in the service of the fatherland, because I would have been a dead man by now. My colleague in Kano was killed, the family wiped out, because we wanted to do the right thing for our country. But today, the value pyramid of Nigeria is upside down. If you are bad, you can do well in our country. So That's the reason why I switched off. But as I noted somewhere, there comes a time, no matter what, we have no other country other than Nigeria. I would have left when I was in university, but I stayed back because I wanted a country for us, despite being locked up by Abacha, kept everywhere, and all that. And so, having done all of that, to find out what we are going through is the reason why I switched on. Therefore, your question as to the statement I issued, history is a graveyard for contending opinions. What I put out there is an empirical evidence of how they have suffered. Because the resistance against a credible election in Nigeria has been long-standing. Dr. Gobadia was the first to set up the ICT unit in the INEC. It was a unit in his office and later a full department. At that time, they used the OMIR to try to sanitize the process. From there to Iwu's era, where you have to use DDC, machine capture machine. Iwu set up the VSAT across 774 local governments for transmission of results for the 2007 election. It was sabotage. All the billions that were spent wasted. Jega era came in. We started and we identified all election rigging processes and that the EV system must be carried out. The EVs had 4 tracks: the biometric registration, biometric accreditation, e-voting, and e-transmission. But as we were doing that, the members of the National Assembly, under Section 52, they were scared and they prohibited the use of any electronic thing. In fact, they used the word no electronic voting machine. That was the language that was used. But we came in, we saw Section 49, Section 52, Section 68 are the clear election rigging provisions. And for 20 years, we fought to get those provisions removed. Now, having done that, by the time Jega came in, we started with what you call biometric registration, with the first time that was carried out. Then you remember that we were called TVC, temporary voters card. From TVC, we moved to PVC. From PVC, we moved to smart card reader to deal with Section 49, which is the election rigging provision in our laws. All right, we did to deal with that. But what happened? By 2015, of course, the sabotage from within and from out was a major problem. In 2015, by the time we brought the card reader was not a voting machine. Card reader was meant to deal with Section 49 that says that a presiding officer, once you are a voter who's registered in a polling unit, once you come, if he is satisfied, it should be given what he called a ballot to vote. That was where politicians started buying voters' cards, warehousing everything, rigging election. We needed to sanitize it. That was why we brought the idea of the smart card reader to identify, confirm, and authenticate a true voter at the polling unit. But what happened when the matter went to courts? The apex court of our fatherland painfully declared that, oh, the smart card reader, beautiful device, however, it should have been written in the Electoral Act. Today, the debate that has held this country down for the past 2 months or thereabout is brought about by the Supreme Court of our fatherland. And I'll give you what the Supreme Court did, how it has thrown everything in disarray. Supreme Court tribunals declared that the regulation and guideline of INEC that stated clearly on the basis of our historical experience that where the results that have been declared at the polling unit that expected or mandated to be sent to the IREB, so that when the result is already on the IREB, nobody will change it. Supreme Court said that IREB is an amusement center. It's a viewing center. It's of no effect and all that. Now, the question now is, what happened to the lineup of authorities? 1979, 1983, and all subsequent judgment of the Supreme Court up to 2015, when the court declared that in any elections, there are three principal legal frameworks that govern election, which are the Constitution, the Electoral Act, and indeed regulations and guidelines made pursuant to the powers given both in the Constitution under Section 160 as well as Section 148 to make rules for the conduct of election. It should be noted.
Okay. I want to come in here. Thank you for all of this you have said. See, as a patriot, the truth has to be said. The horse has bolted away from the stable. We know that those that supported card reader and they called for electronic votings are the ones against it today because it's not going to benefit them. But we know how they spoke to you, supported card reader and all of that. So they have gotten what they want. As we speak today, what's on the IRF is not justiciable. Can you tell us some secrets of rigging so that people can be aware going up to the elections and what people should do as we speak? The matter is already gone. This house we have, they can't be trusted. They are rubber stamped. They've already passed what they want to pass. It is us Nigerians that remain now, those that still have the interest of the country at that. Point out the areas they might likely use to rig with the law that is on ground and how Nigerians can be aware.
Yes, why pointing that? Because actually it becomes this whole engagement. But the fact that I have accepted this invite.
We have to. You
know,
will not relent.
I see this as a mere academic. But let me quickly say this here. And that is that for 10 years, particularly from the Jega leadership up to Mahmoud Yakubu, so much effort was done for e-transmission. There was the INEC NCC report on electronic transmission, which was ready as at 2018. Remember that under the Buhari administration, regrettably, a government that came in through the risk that most of us took, they refused to have amendment to the act. It was only in 2019 that there was no electoral act to amend all the issues we identified in the 2015 election. What was the reason given? Was that ECOWAS required that 6 months to a process they commenced in 2016. Eventually, there was no electoral act in the conduct of 2019 election. Now, when the debate with respect to the 2022 electoral act, don't forget that Buhari regime rejected all the bill 4 times. Yes. Rejected it. Those around the president ensured that it was not done. But there's no book of remembrance in our country. If not for those of us who did the right thing in 2015, those in power in 2015, they will not be there today. Yes. But the moment they came in, they eliminated everybody that was lying, the director and all of that. Yeah. That is what happened. So now, when we, in 2021, when the debate came up, the debate was premised on 2 grounds: that INEC was not ready and that there was no national infrastructure. When that debate was going on in 2021, in respect to the 22 Electoral Amendment Bill Act, INEC was never invited. And I addressed the press conference and I said, why is it that we are behaving like some of the group of people I saw in America? They discuss about the right of abortion of women, but women are not part of it. Do men get pregnant? Why is it that those who are not conducting election are the ones saying INEC is not ready? That led to a statement issued by the commission to the effect that the commission had carried out 10 years of piloting. As a matter of fact, as a commissioner in Cross River State, Leah Imoke's second term election was conducted, and we pioneered the first under Jega leadership. The transmission of results from the ward in the 18 local government, like your studio here, I sat in my office and I was seeing the result and they were updating from each of the world, local government. So because of time,
all the arguments, don't make it. We know they are lying already. We've debunked all the arguments. It has been passed. So how can we, the areas they are going to use to rig, tell Nigerians, all those arguments, we've made it to the past. We know they are.
The consequence, the danger of what has been passed is that we are bringing back what we call incident form. This is another version of incident form.
Yes.
Because there will be no network. History is a graveyard for contending opinions. When we introduced Carida, we decided to have an application for those who don't have fingers. So that we are looking for all-inclusive electoral process. Yeah. But you know what happened? Politicians connive with INEC full staff. That application for only those who don't have fingers was now used to use incident form. The whole of community no longer have fingers and all of that. You see, discretionary power can be abused. The danger of what is going to happen in 2027 as follows. At the polling units, presiding officers' lives are going to be in danger. Because where Nigerians are gathered, results of polling have been announced. Everyone could look at his telephone and you could see network. But the presiding officer says that there's no network. You are going to put the life of that presiding officer in danger. Meanwhile, the children of all the political elites are not going to be at the polling unit. It's the youth corpus that they are going to be faced with. This is a clear danger.
Okay, so
with respect to that, so what they are going to do now is like an incident form. Another version of incident form, which for you to sabotage the entire.
Another one. Can we do another one so that we'll be revealing all the secrets to the people?
No, I don't think any of these things I would like to say here.
Let's say it. That's why people will hear it.
First, one of the danger of what they are trying to do is this. You know that in 2015, in 2019, there were evidence of collusion of some of our staff when they gave the serial number of EC8A in certain polling units for people to print. So when you now have what do you call it from EC8A that have the same serial number and the essential feature, and they are transmitted to the IRF, which one are you going to pick?
So they are going to print ECA.
Yes, because in 2015 it happened.
Yeah.
In 2019 it happened. When INEC went to court to charge, some of the people came to the Senate, one or two persons, it was a common knowledge, came to the Senate. They produced INEC results. But the essential features were not complete. INEC went to court. Regrettably, the court upheld a fake result produced by, even when INEC distant, it said that this is not our original copy of
so I see that, and thank you so much. It's not just the legislature, because now you've also looked at even the judiciary. And even in the case where you came out to give evidence, they still ruled in favor of a result that was not produced by INEC. So even though the legislature is in the eye of the storm currently, it is across the three tiers of government: executive, legislature, and judiciary, in terms of how badly our elections have been run and how credible they are. What is the way out? Because I don't want to leave people feeling despondent or increasing voter apathy for Nigerians who are watching. I want us to still have that sense of a light, despite how dark the tunnel is. So what is the way out? And maybe that's why Rufai was asking the question around where are some of the errors still, and because no matter how bad it seems, there are still people who are willing to go all the way in defense of democracy. What are the options available?
The greatest option that we have is the judiciary that must stand tall and mighty in defense of democracy and the rule of law. The 2022 Electoral Act, there are profound provisions that we put in there, or even unknown to politicians. If you record that in one of our program, we used to tell people there are provisions I don't want to mention on the program.
Those ones, those not tell politicians. Let's not tell.
I say this because were it not for the judiciary, we would not be where we are today. This debate was because of judiciary. Transfer, transmit. Section 60 subsection 5, that said it must be done in accordance to the mode prescribed by INEC. Paragraph 38 of the regulation and guideline actually prescribe that mode. Let me say this here. How do we go forward? One of the things you must remember about the military, despite all the things that we fought military, it was the decision of the military that if election is, there was a decree that if election is bad, is rigged, it should not be the court that should confer victory on anybody, that should go back to the people to be sure of the will of the people. But what we have found in our country, historically, the judiciary had never been on the side of the electorate in the Federal Republic of Nigeria. As we saw what happened in June 12th, and everything that has happened so far, judiciary had never been. And I say this here. Democracy is a danger. When judiciary shows sign of weakness, collapse, or irrelevance, the only reason why we fought the military, talking about importance of judiciary here, is because there was no parliament. The people have no say. Otherwise, there was an executive, there was judiciary. The only arm that was missing was parliament. And that was why we wanted democracy. How do you explain that a National Assembly that don't carry out public hearing across the geopolitical zone and the people spoke? Look at what has happened. The Falcon no longer listen to the Falconer. This is what Professor, one of your own, John Frisk, referred to as semiotic democracy. There's a gulf between what the people want and what had been given. So judiciary is the greatest challenge. My constituency, they have failed. With respect to that, I must say this because I have all the records. I have all the record of failures. When it comes to election, judiciary have not done well. In fact, the Nigerian people now see my constituency as a veritable, conspiracy against them because they have never given effect to it. Look at what they have done with primary. Today, nobody should think about any primary in Nigeria because Supreme Court struck down the practice direction that was issued in line with Section 29 of the Act. Today, no primary in Nigeria. So the way forward is for the judiciary to stand tall and mighty in defense of due process, because what we are saying now is not what is expected.
Okay,
Dr. Abati has a question.
Igini, if I may come in here. Now, number one, you've written a lot about turnover and all of that. Some people have said it's scaremongering. I don't know whether you have received that reaction. And people are saying, in any case, if 70% or 80% of the current members of the National Assembly don't come back, Nigerians will even celebrate. So turnover in the National Assembly should not be an issue. And in any case, the lawmakers have demonstrated with the drama yesterday that they really don't care one way or the other. You've talked about dangers. Now, as a patriot who still believes in this country, two suggestions. Some people have said you should write a book because you seem to know so much about our electoral process. But more importantly, what are your recommendations beyond what has happened with the Electoral Act Amendment Bill? What are your recommendations? You've talked about the role of the judiciary. How about the security agencies? How about the media? How about civil society generally? Without falling foul of the allegation of trying to incite people when you say there will be danger at polling units. That could discourage people. As a former chief electoral officer yourself, you should be encouraging people to come out. But what do you recommend?
Dr. Abati, a stone seen coming should not blind the eye. And when I give my advice, the reason why I broke my silence before the decision taken was to offer the nation, particularly members of the National Assembly, the opportunity to know this. With respect to the figures given out, all you need to do is to go and check the list of those who were elected in 2019, compare it with the list of those who were elected in 2023. That will give you a figure. With respect to why, it does not really matter, that cannot be correct, because we have had brilliant legislators who are so good, who were brilliant, independent, showed integrity. But because governors are the one that will determine who becomes a member of House of, who get a ticket to go to the State House of Assembly, to House of Rep, to Senate, most of them did not return. And where you don't return, the only fallback position would have been in a robust system that you have put in place to be able to secure you. That is why it is very important. Now, when you talk about scaremongering, there's nothing about scaremongering, because, you see, it is the home of a coward that people usually gather to point at the tomb of yesterday's warrior. A young man that I recommended must be given a job from Osun State, who is now still working when I was the commission, demonstrated bravery when he was about to be killed. Certain safeguards were not there. When you say that, give an option to a presiding officer that if there is no network, there will be no network, because the capacity to connive the states, to connive with mobile network operators, not to allow network to go on, is there. I don't want to mention a state. In 2007 and 2023, that state ensured that on governorship election, they jammed the entire system so that nobody could get in touch with what they were doing. What we are doing now, it is terrible, because even though the fact that you transmit directly, there are other things that people like to do during election. You have to look at ad hoc staff recruitment. Who are the people we are going to recruit? Because in the final analysis, from INEC leadership headquarters, INEC office at the state, INEC office at the local government, that is where the battle ends. From there, polling unit down to the last stage of collation, it is those Nigerians who are going to be brought in. At every state, in every state of the federation, a REC will be deploying, depending on the number of local government. For example, in Akwa Ibom, I deployed over 28,000 ad hoc staff. How many staff do you have? Another. These are the people that are going to conduct the election. When you now give them this type of omnibus, latitude, another, it's going to be abused. There will be no network. That is what is going to happen in that election. And so, when you talk about remedy, I would have thought that the reform we're talking about, and that's the reason I didn't want to participate. I was thinking that it would be about how to reform, ensuring that the onus of proof of how well election is conducted should be on the election management body, as we demonstrated while we were in office, wherever I served. That was what I did. Two, I had thought that this disposition of election matter before people are sworn in will be what we'll be looking out for. We didn't see that at all. Where is the Electoral Offences Tribunal that for the past 20 years, it will not be there? So the issue about e-transmission is the resistance coming from the elite.
The question I've been asking everybody that they can't answer me. With what they have passed.
Let me ask you.
Will
you then recommend? Will you then recommend to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu not to sign the bill as it is?
It is by indeed humble recommendation to Mr. President that you are a man of history. You were a senior man to very many of us in the struggle at a time when the journey of Nigeria and the prospect of democracy was less certain. What is going to be presented before you is a recipe for chaos. It's a recipe to undermine all that you have done while we're in the trenches. And also remember that at a time when the PDP was in office, and when we were in office, and they were saying that there was going to be a federal might, some of us stood out to say, no, in 2015, it's going to be the might of the people, not federal might, but the might of the people through the ballot that should determine what will happen. You should be a man of history. What is put before you, please take it back. Don't sign it.
Okay. Real quickly, I want to ask you, the question I've been asking everybody I can't answer. Will the result on the IRF be justiciable?
The Supreme Court by the decision of the last decision of the Supreme Court, it is very clear when the Supreme Court says that the IREP is just a viewing center and that it ought to have been in the Electoral Act. I disagree with that decision. It is contrary to the whole line of authorities, decision by the Supreme Court itself, because regulations and guidelines made by the Commission pursuant to Section 160, as well as Section 148 of the Act, they have the force of law. They are subsidiary legislation. As a matter of fact, INEC is the only regulator of election in the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And the first primary responsibility of every regulator, it is law-making, rule-making. And that is why the Central Bank of Nigeria don't go to the National Assembly every now and then in terms of what you need to do to regulate the banking sector. That is how it should be. That was why Jonathan, when he was in office, and when we came on board, we looked at all the executive bodies set up under Section 153. And we pointed out to President Jonathan because the law as it was then was to the effect that all the bodies set up under Section 153 are subject to the direction and control of the president with respect to their powers to make regulations and procedure. It was Jonathan regime who now sent the first alteration in 2011 that ensured that with respect to the Independent National Electoral Commission, and just go and read it, these powers to make rules, otherwise regulating procedure shall not be subject to the direction of the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. It was President Jonathan who put that in. The decision of INEC that transmit the results from the polling unit to the IREP, it can be encapsulated in 3 words: trusts, safety, and efficiency of the decision of the people. Because everything that we have developed is to ensure that who becomes what must be determined at the polling unit, not in the court of law. The court should not be determined who becomes a governor, a member of the House of Assembly, a president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Let that be the decision of the people. That is the lesson. That is the last thing. That is the lesson that we must take from United Kingdom. Britain that even introduced Nigeria into election rigging. For a period of almost 100 years, there was no post-election adjudication in United Kingdom. And that is what we should learn, because the court in England, politicians, they are scared of the court in England, because in the absence of strict and purposive interpretation of the law, because every provision of Electoral Act, so sponsored by INEC, is to deal with a mischief, that it is now the duty of the court to advance the remedy that have been proffered to deal with that remedy, and not to do what they are doing right now, working with politicians, agreeing with them to do what is being done. That is the only way we can have a democracy that we are proud of. That's the only way we can build a society where there will be opportunity for all and responsibility from all.
Indeed, very well said, very well summarized in terms of your points that you've been making today with us, Barrister Mike Igini. Great to have you on the show today, and thank you very much for breaking it down for us. Like we already said, it's already been done, well, until the assent by the president, and you have made the recommendations that he should not assent to that. Well, let's see what he will do. We'll take a short break now.